Hello there, greetings everybody. Welcome here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So today, last day of the year, I wish you all a happy new year. I hope everybody will have a good night and be safe. And so we're going to now talk about the reason I'm here, which is metal. Now, metal is a show that I normally do on Friday nights, but have switched it to Saturdays because of the conflicts with my work. So this show will come out every Saturday at 11, or not every Saturday, but alternating Saturdays at 11, along with Into the Progverse, which will alternate the other week. So what's metal about? So metal is about heavy metal bands, basically, of all different genres. We're doing all different genres, and we are splitting it in half. So half the time I will be doing older bands, and then the older than 10 years, and then bands that are newer than 10 years on the next episode. So this week we're doing an older band called Celtic Frost. And the other thing about it is that this show will actually come out on New Year's Eve. I decided I wanted to do something for New Year's Eve, and instead of putting this out Saturday night, which was last night, I will put this out tonight for New Year's Eve. So that's all the main details down. The next thing to note is this about this band, Celtic Frost, which is the band that I chose to do. So they are a Swiss band from Zurich. They formed in June of '84 out of the ashes of a previous band that three of the members were members of, called Hellhammer. Now, Hellhammer was not received well by the metal. It took a lot of heat, and they brought that with them to Celtic Frost. Even though it was a different band, a lot of people said it's the same band, they just changed the name. I don't know if there's any kind of justice for that or not, but that's what I've read, and I think that's probably accurate as far as people's reactions go. So this band is known for their boundary pushing. So they pushed the boundaries of extreme metal to the extremes. Extreme metal to the extremes. That sounds interesting. So they were influenced by in the metal realm by Sabbath, Venom, Judas Priest, in the new wave realm by Susie and the Banshees, and in the extreme punk or hardcore punk element by Discharge. So they had little bits of these elements in their music. So they put out basically 6 albums over the course of their history and 2 EPs, although originally I think Morbid Tales was considered an EP at first and then became, because they added songs to it, I think that's what happened, and it then became considered an LP. So it was the first release in 1984, featuring members of the band, Steve Priestley on drums. I'm just going to look at my notes here. Then you got Thomas Gabriel Fisher on guitars and lead vocals, and then you have Martin Eric Ain on bass and also co-lead vocals. So, but after a short period of time, Priestley left and was replaced by Darso. I think Darso was actually the one on Morbid Tales on the album, but I don't have the album, so I can't check that out. They released a couple of more. They released an EP shortly after in '85 called Emperor's Return, and another one in '86 called Tragic Serenades. So they had 3 EPs total, while Morbid Tales ended up being an LP. Then they released 2 more albums, 2 more albums fairly quickly in succession, '85 and '87, Megatherion, and then Into the Pandemonium. This was the style of music that they were known for. It's extreme thrash, death metal, with the, I don't know if his voice was supposed to be a growl voice. It had that growl element to him, but I think that was just his normal voice. Anyways, the album Into the Pandemonium is the one that kind of encapsulates their sound. They were canonized for this sound, like really well liked for this sound, and that album was the one that was cited as being the main one with that normal sound for it. In '88, they did an album called Cold Lake, an LP in 1988 when it was released. This album had a bit of a different sound to it, so it wasn't nearly as extreme, more commercial sounding, more flamboyant sounding. They took a lot of criticism from metal magazines and from their fans in general for this sound, but they put it out nevertheless. I've listened to it. You can hear the difference. Even a person like me who's not really all that familiar with their music and genre, I could hear the difference in the album. They then, in 1990, put out an album called Vanity Nemesis, which shortly after they disbanded, as I think Fisher, was it Fisher? No, it wasn't. They just disbanded as a band. That's what it was. So they disbanded, and they didn't reform again until 2001, when they all came back together, and they put out what is considered their main album, or there's a name for it, their signature album. That's the word I was looking for. Their signature album, which is Monotheist. I think that's how you pronounce it. From 2006. This was their last album. The band, shortly after, a couple of years after, disbanded again when after Fisher's departure. So up until this point, they've been canonized, like I said, for this style of music, bringing it forth. Lots of different sounds to their music. I find them different than a lot of kind of death metal bands because of their influences. So you had their initial lineup, which I already said. Then Darso left in '85, was replaced by Reed St. Mark on drums and percussion, and Dominic Steiner on bass. He joined on bass. In '88, Kurt Victor Bryant joined on bass, and Oliver Ambery on guitar. In '90, Kurt Victor Bryant moved to playing guitars, so that I guess Aaron would continue to play bass at that point. Earl Unala played guitars from 2001 on, and then the final lineup featured Fisher on guitars and lead vocals, Ain on lead vocals and bass, and Franco Cesa on drums. They did have some live members that joined them for periods of time. Ron Marks in guitars in 1987, then Anders Olden on guitars in 2006 and 2007, and then Santa Ura, which is where is he? Here he is. Yeah, anyway, Santa Ura playing guitars in 2007, 2008. So that's kind of what their lineups were. So not a huge amount of change. Basically, the main guys were in there the whole time, the two main guys. And so the band maintained a fairly stable sound, even though at some points it became more commercial. I think their last album is probably their best album. I'm just going to talk a little bit about these albums now, because I think this is the crux of the group, is their albums. In most cases, that is the case. So the first album, Morbid Tales, from '84, very thrash, speed metal-like, with some tracks that are a tiny bit punky in sound. I wouldn't call them punk songs at all. They still have that thrash sound, but there's a punk element to it. And there's also some doom metal sounds to some of the tracks as well. To me, doom metal, the difference between them is doom metal is slower, methodic, and heavier than the thrash and the Black Death. The Black Death they're both almost all three realms are equally as heavy, but it's just the speed in which they play them, I think, is the difference to me. Also, the doom metal I tend to be a lot more attracted to than the other two. There was one track on the initial album called, I think it's called Pause Macabre. I'm not sure. It's dark with lots of kind of noises and voices and sounds. It sounds almost like the beginning of a horror movie, but there's actually not a lot of music involved in this track, but they put it in there, and that's the theme. There's another track like that on Megatherion called Tears in a Prolific Dream. Also kind of a similar song, maybe not quite the same soundscape, but still having the voices, still having those noises and sounds, and kind of a dark feel to it, I think. So that was on Megatherion. So the EP Emperor's Return, which was released as part of Morbid Tales in 1999, so they kind of combined the two. That's why I think Morbid Tales is kind of considered an LP, because now it's combined and is a much longer album. It's also this EP is a very similar style to Morbid Tales. So it just has a lot of that kind of sound to it, to them. Very similar albums. You couldn't really tell the difference between the two. To be honest, I think they're pretty much the same. In '85, they did also release to Megatherion a full album. This is, at that time, it would have been their first, but Morbid Tales is actually their first, so it's actually their second full-length album. And very similar in regards to Morbid Tales. I don't see a lot of difference between the two. Very strong album. This one actually is considered their first album, LP, even though eventually Morbid Tales became one. Then you have Into the Tragic Serenades, which was released later as part of Megatherion in '99 when they did the re-releases. It's very similar to the previous releases, very similar sound. And then you have Into the Pandemonium, which is also an LP, released in '87. This one considered their optimal sound for their style. Really good. There are some tracks on this I found to be a little on the proggy side, and kind of almost a spacey sound, I guess maybe might be more appropriate. They also did a cover of Mexican Radio by Wall of Voodoo, which I found kind of interesting. It's a metal version of this song, but clearly it has that kind of new wave-ish sound to it as well. They did the EP I Won't Dance in 1987. Similar to sound as Pandemonium, not a lot of difference in the sound there either. So then we get a little bit of a change when Cold Lake comes in '88. It's another thrash album, definitely, but this one has more of a commercial, maybe a flamboyant sound to it. So they've kind of, to me, it sounds like they've taken away those rough edges and dialed it back from the edges to make it more acceptable, I guess, to more moderate metal fans. That would be my guess. I don't know for sure, but that's to me, the way they've changed it makes it sound like they might be targeting something like that. Yeah, so I thought it was an okay album, but you can clearly hear that it's much more commercial sounding. Then their last their last album before they broke up in 1990, and was again re-released in '99. More metal-like again, some thrash elements here, but there's also a few prog elements here too. They have their prog moments on this. The album is clear sounding too, probably the best of the earlier albums in that regard. But there is definitely a prog element on this album. Not all the songs, most of the songs still have that similar style that they had started early on and then toned down a bit in Cold Lake, and then they've kind of upped it just a bit here, so it's not as commercial sounding, but definitely still has that death metal kind of thrashy sound, and the vocals, of course, help with that as well. No change to the vocals on any of the albums, so far as I can see. Then they did their final, when they got back together in 2001, they made an album in 2006 called Monotheist. This one actually made the charts. I can't remember the actual chart position. I think it was in the 30s, though. This is more doomy sounding, this album. Much more doomy sounding, I think. More melodic. Not quite as heavy or fast-paced. Definitely has that more grinding kind of heavy doom sound to it, the album as a whole, but they still do have some death metal stuffs on there. It's not as dominant as it was on the previous albums, I don't think. There's a little bit of thrash and speed, a couple of tracks here that are a little faster paced than the others, and there's a couple of tracks, I think, where it starts out kind of really doomy and then speeds up a bit and then goes back to that doomy sound. And it also has that more symphonic metal sound to it as well. On the last track, I found that it was very symphonic sounding metal almost, which I think kind of leads to that prog spacey sound that they sometimes have on some of their tracks. So overall, this is a excellent band for people who are into that death metal, speed metal thing with the growls and the fast pace and pushing the extremes of this type of thing. If you like that kind of stuff, this is definitely one of those great bands. But I'm not telling anybody out there anything they don't already know if they're following this type of genre. This is maybe for people that are not sure if this is a band for them or not. I'm a novice when it comes to this type of thing. I found some of the stuff a little bit extreme for me, but there was enough good stuff here, especially the guitar riffing is excellent. If you want to get into that and you like that guitar riffing and you're a guitar person, this stuff, you could find lots of stuff here that you would like. So for me, Celtic Frost, a good, solid kind of extreme metal band that has pushed my boundaries for metal out further, and which means that I will be able to listen to stuff that and understand it a little bit more next time I do one of these. I think I've done a couple of these now. This one, I think, came as from watching certain people talk about them. I thought, these would be an excellent band to do for a kind of extreme metal, thrash metal, death metal types thing. So anyways, I hope that you, and actually I used the term death metal, but I think it's actually black metal that I'm referring to. I don't really know the difference between the two. To me, they sound similar, but maybe there's people out there who know that there's a significant difference between the two. These guys are actually more black metal than death metal, according to what I've read anyways. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Metal. We will be back in 2 weeks to do another episode of Metal. This time it'll be a newer band. I haven't really picked anybody yet. I think I'm going to probably go more for a doom metal band. That seems to be the interest of the day for me. So that will come out 2 weeks from now on a Saturday at 11. Sorry, I got a bit of a frog in my throat now. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe. Any comments about anything I've said or any of the music at all, please leave them in the comment section below. Hit the notification bell so that you get this content. And we will see you in 2 weeks for Metal. Take care. Bye.